pets and how it, I don't know, maybe it was just something they just threw in, or is
Yeah,
it a
my
anomaly?
guess is it was something that it was just that they threw in.
Okay.
But it's a good point. So the way I like to think of subqueries is, so like for example, if we wanted to, let's use our rating here for example. If we're going to take this rating example, like in earlier in the meeting, we ran this and we get all the movies that have PG and G in them.
Right.
Um, and those ones are hard in the film table. But if we want to get a list of cities and countries, like kind of how we did a little later, we have to do a join. Like where's our inner join here? So we did it like this, but the other way we can do
You're
it is
not
with a
sharing
sub.
your screen right now.
Oh,
Sorry.
gotcha. Thank you for the reminder.
It's okay.
Makes it a little bit harder to see, huh? All right,
I'm
so
using the spirit. We got it.
yeah. So if we want to get the country, the city and country like we did earlier, we either have to do a join or we can find certain ones with a subquery. Because in this case, let's say we wanted all the countries in the United States. We wanted all the cities in the United States. Sorry, we could say where country is equal to United States. But it took a join to do that. So now we're going to get all the, and I guess it helps if I spell right. There we go. So if we want to find all the cities that have a country of United States, we have to either do a join or we can use a subquery. So we can get the exact same information. So let's just select the city from city where country ID is in. And now we know that the in clause just wants a list, right?
Right.
So if we wanted a list of countries, in this case, we really just want one. We can use in, we could use equal in this case, but really what we want that to be, because we're looking for the country ID of the United States. So let's select country ID from country where country is equal to United States. So that's our query to find the country ID of the United States, which is 103. So if we wanted to, we could take this query that we know pulls the country ID of the United States, and we could pop it right in that in clause in parentheses, and we're going to get all the countries in the United States. Because ultimately, the way I like to think about it, whatever we get in this is going to just return a list as long as we only select one column. If we select more than one column, we're going to have a problem because, it can't say, oh, country ID is in two things, so because basically this is going to build a list for us. Now we could make this bigger. We could say where country is equal to United States, or let's do it like this. Let's use an in where country ID is in the United States, or Great Britain. I think Great Britain's in there. Something like that.
Too.
Something like that. Oh, and I messed something up. We need another parenthesis. There we go. So basically, we can write whatever query we want that normally gives us results. And that's the way that I like to think of it. I always test my subqueries outside first, because then I can say, oh, like in this case, we wanted United States and Great Britain, but I'm only getting one result, and that's the United States. So then we can say, oh, let's select everything from country, and let's see what we actually need it to be. Is it England by chance? Maybe it's just not in there.
Maybe it's United Kingdom.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right. Yep, United Kingdom. So like in that case, that's why I like to test them outside. United Kingdom. So now we should get two. We get 102 and 103. So then we can take this query that we just wrote, minus the semicolon, obviously. We'll just get it. Just Pop it right in there. And now we will get all of our countries that are in that list. And essentially we can simplify this down because we ran this. This is essentially the equivalent of saying where country ID in 102, 103. It's those two statements are synonymous. The only difference is in this case, we can use a subquery to get user-friendly names.
So the subquery in a nutshell is anything you put in the parentheses after the operator.
Yep. Yeah, because it's
Okay.
returning a list. So I like to think of it like a little function.
Mm-hmm.
So when it actually executes this query, it's going to run this for every row it returns. So it's going to go through and it's going to find every city. And then for every city, it's going to say, okay, select these two things. And is the country ID and city equal to 102 or 103? If it's true, then it returns the row. If it's false, then it doesn't. So subqueries are actually expensive on the computer because it's going to run this query however many cities there are in our database, which is pretty fast for us. But if you're getting with bigger tables, you want to avoid subqueries as much as possible. But there's sometimes you just can't avoid them. So
Now, that's something you mentioned earlier in the class. You mentioned about, say, a country that no longer exists, or we go in and delete it because it doesn't have any cities attached with it. Isn't that a dangerous thing to do for historical reasons?
Yeah. So most of the times you don't want to, but I mean, a lot of times we delete. I mean, it depends on like what the business logic of what you're doing is.
Right.
Most of the time I try to avoid deleting data pretty much at all costs. And so a lot of times they'll have start date and end dates. But like I said, let's say, and maybe it's just a name change, but like, let's say that the United Kingdom changes their name officially to Great Britain or so on and so forth. Or, at one point they were probably England.
Yeah.
And we have two choices. We can either go in and change the name to England, or we can, kind of change it so that it's accurate or something like that. So it just kind of depends. Or let's say that a specific film actually we're not going to rent it anymore. Now, normally I would say we would just want to make it inactive, which I like to build on all my databases so that we could just simply deactivate a movie or put an end date on it saying that we're not going to rent it anymore. But in this case, like, it doesn't have one. So if we don't want that to be available, we can just delete it. Now, depending on your business logic, maybe you don't have a problem with that. Maybe this is just simply, to track certain things or whatever. And in that case, it's not necessarily bad.
Yeah, I work in the life insurance and financial services industry. And so our database is more customer tracking and service related. And so when we have a company like, say, Transamerica Life, that in Canada is now called Avari, which is a name they picked because it doesn't mean anything, it can really mess things up because the historical data will all show Transamerica, but the current company would show like a new piece of business that was placed would be Avari, right?
Yeah. And so normally what I do is the best practice is you have start date and end date on everything like that. Like where, like, let's say a company, like, let's just say Avari, and let's say they started today, and they would be active. But let's say that, like, there's another one called, I'm just gonna say dollar because insurance takes all my money. Let's say they started like May 20th of 1990. Oh, no, my numlock is not on apparently. May 20th of 1993. But let's say that they're no longer active as of today, or let's say their end date was yesterday. Basically, this is the way that I like to track like historical records.
Right.
because then we could, let's say Dala, like let's say we're a pharmaceutical company and we work with different companies, um, but they come and go, obviously, like a lot do.
Yeah. In my industry, they buy each other.
Yeah, exactly. But let's say they split, again. So let's say Dala all of a sudden comes back. Let's say they, instead of ending this year, let's say they ended in 2017. So let's say in 2017, they said, hey, we're not going to do business with you anymore because our CEOs hate each other, whatever. So we end dated them. And now in our code logic, we, like, let's say we have a web interface where people can choose different products. We would have it checked to make sure that the end date is either greater than today or it's null. Because then in that case, it would only return the active companies, which is Avari. But let's say Dala came back all of a sudden and it said, hey, we want to do business with you again. We got a new CEO and he's way nicer. Let's say that was in 2020. Now all of a sudden, we have Dala twice, but now we can track historical records to say, hey, we did business with Dala from May 20th of 93 to January 18th of 2017. We quit doing business with them until January 19th of 2020, and we're still doing business with them. So yeah, most of the time you don't want to delete data, but it all depends. And that's the biggest part. And if you've already been messing with your company's database, then you'll know it all depends on the data design and who built it the first time. And hopefully they did a good job because sometimes, you have to face tough choices. Like, do I delete this data or is it still going to show up to customers? Like a good one I like to use is credit cards. So like, let's say we have Visa, but let's say MasterCard. Let's say we're a store, we're like Target or something, and we only want to take certain credit cards. So let's say we accepted Visa starting this year today. We accepted MasterCard on May 20th, 93 when we first opened. But let's say something happened, our card readers didn't support MasterCard or whatever, and we quit using them. But then we got new point of sale terminals, and so we started again. Because like if it's an online store, we don't want people being able to buy with MasterCard. And so we would obviously want to control that. So
Okay, and because it ended, it just changes the activity to being inactive, I guess.
yeah, and it just, like I said, a lot of it just depends on your code logic. That's what most of the systems I've ever seen, they do this for tracking historical records.
Yeah.
Because it both controls, because then I can quickly say, I want everything where the end date or today is between start date and end date. And obviously we would put an end date, a fabricated fake end date in the future where it's null.
Right.
And I do that because that way I can quickly find all the active credit card types that we currently accept. But I still have a historical record.
Right. Which
Another
is important.
good one. Oh yeah.
I mean, in our industry, because policies can be around for years and years, and if like Transamerica Life that became Avari, it's still the same company, but it's has a new branding. That's one thing. But when you have, say, we have one of our insurance companies called Canada Life, and they were bought by Great West Life, but they still operate under Canada Life. So you got some kind of crazy things going on. And then you have other companies like Manulife who bought Maritime Life, which is a great company, by the way, but they don't exist. But they were 30% of our business was Maritime Life. So now in our database, it's all kinds of different. I don't have access to the coding of the database. It was a service provided, a hosted database for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm having to sometimes massage and work with the data and return different queries, or at least I used to, for the company.
Oh,
And
certainly.
That's why I'm kind of taking this, because I'm interested in it and learning more. On another point, I still am having issues with the permissions and my user account, the one I created. I don't know why. It is just unless I use the root, I can't do anything. Am I missing something?
Yeah, that's kind of weird. And maybe what we want to do is just start fresh.
Okay.
So like login is root. I can't even remember what mine is. So we would log in as root, and then we would create our user. So create user, and you can just kind of do whatever. So in my case, I'm just going to create one, TA Crook at localhost. Identified by, and then this is where I put in my password. So let's say I'm just going to do the same one, School Rocks. So I created my user. Then I'm going to grant access to that. So in this case, Sakila. So I'm going to say grant all privileges on Sakila.star to TA Crook at localhost.
Okay. And that should do it.
Yep, and we'll test it right here. So I'm going to say MySQL-U TA Crook -P. And I just did School Rocks. And we're in show databases. Show databases. Let's use Sakila. We're going to create table person. The name varchar 20. Yep. So it looks like that should work.
Okay, let's see in mine when I'm trying to do it. Let me just open mine up here.